would now like to turn the meeting over to our distinguished speaker from the State Senate, Senator Patrick Colbeck. Why don't you try that? Sure.
Give it a shot. Is that okay, everybody? All right. Well, try to get it so that I'm not in Detroit Tiger Column, or Tiger Stadium Column viewing seating here or whatever. Yeah, that's right. Well, thank you guys very much. Thank you, Dennis. It's a privilege to be here. It's been an extremely busy Senate term and a very busy summer. A lot of you may have followed what's going on in regards to a lot of the healthcare debates that have happened in the state. Spent quite a bit of time working on opposition to Medicaid expansion. Unfortunately, today the governor did sign Medicaid expansion into law. I may point out that amongst the signers today was Congressman John Dingell, and I got to tell you, this is it was a tough pill to swallow for me. When I got interested in politics on the basis of fighting Obamacare, I was never involved in politics or in any way, shape, or form before I saw what was going on with the Affordable Care Act, and I was one of those strange birds that actually read all of H.R. 3200, which was the original version of Obamacare. I call it the pre-kickback version. At H.R. 3590 was a kickback version, and I started reading what was going on with that, and I was very concerned with the direction, and it was very evident if you read through the legislation that it's all about control. It is not about care. There are 157 new organizations added to the rolls out in the federal government, out in D.C., and their goal is to find different ways of controlling the people. And that's what, remember Congressman Dingell and WJR, Paul W. Smith, back in 2009, when Paul W. asked him, why are you willing to delay the implementation of the quote-unquote benefits of the Affordable Care Act for 4 years, when by your own estimates there are 72,000 people a year dying because of inadequate health care? And he said, Paul W., because it's going to take that long to go off and put in the necessary administrative procedures to control the people. For me, that's sickening, especially in context of what tomorrow is. Everybody know what tomorrow is?
Constitution Day.
Constitution Day. And that Constitution is a framework where we, the people, have granted limited powers to the federal government. And from my perspective, I don't care what Justice Roberts says, there's no provision in the Constitution for what's being done under the Affordable Care Act. So, and by the way, it was never set up so that only the Supreme Court justices could determine what's constitutional. It's each and every one of us' responsibility, including all elected officials, to make that determination as to what's constitutional or not. And so I'm not giving up on that. I still think it's unconstitutional, and I'm still going to do whatever I can to fight that onerous law that's not good for anybody.
Yeah, thank you.
So, the good news is it's killing itself. Whenever you have something that's got 2,700 pages of statute, 20,000 pages of regulation, as an old IT project manager, there's no way they're going to implement this in anytime soon. And it's been proven out. Right now, the only people that are impacted by the Affordable Care Act are individuals. They're the only ones who have not had the provisions associated with the Affordable Care Act delayed. You know why? They're the only ones without lobbyists speaking up for them. Well, that's what elected officials are supposed to be. We're supposed to be representing we the people. It's about time we stood up and did that. So we did that on the election, back in the vote on the Senate. And, how many of you guys have saw the proceedings of what was happening on the Senate floor in regards to Medicaid expansion? All right, it wasn't exactly primetime TV, but it was a pretty anxious day. First and foremost, I'm proud that 18 out of 26 Republican senators voted no on Medicaid expansion. Originally, there was 19 that voted no on Medicaid expansion. That would have been sufficient to block it. But they reconsidered the vote. So we had an original vote the first time where Senate Majority Leader came up to me and asked me what I planned on doing, and I said I asked him how many votes he thought he had, and he said 7 to 9. I go, well, I'm not planning on voting. And the reason I said that is because I don't know if you guys know, in the Constitution, the lieutenant governor has the ability to cast a tie-breaking vote. No matter what happens, you need 20 votes in order to pass a bill. I knew that we had, he only had 7 votes for the in the Senate to go off and pass this. There were 12 Democratic votes. That adds up to 19. He didn't have 20 votes. So if I would put up my no vote, we would have had 19 no votes, and the Lieutenant Governor could have cast a tiebreaker. I kept off my vote to keep it from going to the Lieutenant Governor for the tiebreaker. And for about 3 hours, that was successful at killing Medicaid expansion in the state of Michigan. And unfortunately, they used that 3 hours to go off and twist the arm of one of my colleagues to have him flip his vote. So that was very disappointing. But the good news is there were 18 that stood strong. They believe me, they wanted much more than 8 votes in order to pass this. They wanted to be able to say that they had a plurality. These guys could have been offered anything that they wanted, any project that they wanted, any special bill that they wanted, campaign support, the governor going out and doing campaign events for them, and they held firm. And so that's the silver lining on all this. We also did not grant it immediate effect, which means that this bill will not take effect until mid-March of next year. And I'm still hoping that we can work out something in the interim to go off and as the train wreck continues with Obamacare, maybe build up enough momentum where we can start at least getting some compromises and potentially even full repeal of this legislation before it really impacts the state of Michigan. And I want to be clear, the reason I'm opposed to Medicaid expansion, it's not because I'm some cold, heartless Republican that just doesn't want to see anybody with low income go off and get their free handouts. That's not at the core of any of this argument here. I share the objectives of everybody who's talking about getting a good health care system. I want to lower the cost of health care. I want to go off and promote or expand the access to good quality health care for everybody. I want to protect consumer choice. But the issue is government solutions are not the ones that work and actually achieve those objectives. It's the private sector that achieves those objectives. And I provided an alternate plan that I call the Patient-Centered Care Act that actually did that. It promoted a free market alternative to what's being promoted in government. The baseline approach associated with Medicaid expansion is that you keep the cost of health care up here, and you go, in order to make it so that folks with low income can go off and afford it, is you take money from somebody else and use that to go off and subsidize the cost of that care for another group. So in other words, you take money from some people and give it to other people, and you pick winners and losers. The approach that I took was fundamentally different. How do you lower the cost of health care for everybody? How do you have a solution that provides assistance for and access to good quality health care for 10 million citizens instead of just 400,000? And we found that with a loophole in Obamacare. It's section 10,104, which which tells you why nobody saw it beforehand. And it's a loophole for what's called direct primary care services. Anybody ever hear of direct primary care? Direct primary care essentially eliminates third-party billing for primary care services. That means you go in, you pay with your debit card from your HSA. You don't go in and give them an insurance card, and then you get 3 mailings from Blue Cross saying this is not a bill. And essentially it takes out all the third-party billing, TPT coding out at the doctors. So instead of having 5 to 7 admins sitting in a back room somewhere working on paperwork, and instead of a doctor spending 20 to 50% of their time dealing with insurance paperwork, the doctors focus on taking care of the patients, and you have one person up front managing scheduling and the actual cash transactions. A much simpler model, and it takes about 50% of the cost out of your healthcare costs. So right now we spend about $5,000 per person for a single adult population in Medicaid. If with this approach on it, for as little as $2,100, you can have a direct primary care service plan with a high deductible health plan and an HSA wrapper for about $2,100 a year. So I'm here to tell you there's another way of going off and approaching this. And by the way, when you do that, you get commercial grade insurance. You're not getting a Medicaid card that only pays hospitals 47 cents on the dollar. You're getting insurance that pays the hospitals $1 for $1. Right now, they keep talking. I don't know if you guys have heard the issue of cost shifting and uncompensated care in the hospitals. Well, that was part of the reason or rationale that they used to expand Medicaid. They said, well, now hospitals are going to get paid for that uncompensated care that they've got. Well, all they did really is swap out uncompensated care for undercompensated care. And so, you ever hear the joke about the guy who said that he was selling products at a loss, but it was okay because he was making it up on volume? That's what we're doing with Medicaid expansion. And the saddest part about all of it is that the people that are supposed to be benefiting from this expansion are not getting good health care as a result. There's lots of peer-reviewed studies, and then we cut out. Is the governor controlling this? No, I'm just there's a lot of peer-reviewed studies that actually demonstrate that people who receive no insurance coverage at all actually get better health outcomes than those on Medicaid. Why is that? Because a lot of these are under managed care programs that actually protract their care. So it's a case of procrastination, if you will, or you drag out the actual treatment for things that you really need. So in your head, you're thinking, hey, it's okay. I got this little plastic card here. It says I'm insured. In the meantime, you can't find any physicians that will actually take that card because they don't get compensated at $1 for $1. They get 47 cents on the dollar, and it just stretches out your time. So it's not very good care, and I'm concerned that people are being sold a bad bill of goods, not just with Medicaid expansion, but with Obamacare in general. And some people may think I'm taking a logic leap talking about Medicaid expansion and Obamacare in the same breath. I'd ask you to go off and read H.R. 3590, that's the Affordable Care Act. It's Section 2001 of the Affordable Care Act is Medicaid expansion. It's an enabler. It's set up to be a path to the single-payer payment system, which means that which is a path to government control of all of your health care decisions. That's not the way we're supposed to operate, folks. That's not the way our country is designed to operate at all. So, on that rosy picture, I don't know how much time I have here, but I was going to go into Common Core and road funding if you want.
Yeah, both those are good issues.
Yeah, I figured we'll keep all the light stuff here. By the way, I don't tackle stop sign color legislation. I hit all the big stuff. So, which I don't know if you guys are familiar with the little thing I helped lead, which is called Right to Work. You guys familiar with that at all? That people were telling us that. Thanks. It was a team effort, but we had a lot of folks and providing air cover and ground cover on it that made it possible, but we were told that we could not do that in 20 years. We were told there was a pipe dream to come on in and do it. Well, we got it done in 2 years. Me and Representative Mike Shirkey, I led it out in the Senate, and Mike led it out in the House. And along the way, we had great support from a lot of different groups, like Freedom to Work Coalition with Norm Hughes, and also Terry Bowman, which is an actual UAW conservative. We formed Union Conservatives. He helped us with that. Brian Pannebecker. It's a great thing. We should be promoting the heck out of it right now. And we are when it comes to MEDC. We've got some promotions going on in Wall Street Journal, stuff like that. But we need to be promoting it even more. I got to tell you, I had the opportunity to talk to Governor Nikki Haley and Governor Bobby Jindal within the last few months, and they're excited as heck. There's general buzz across the country right now that if Michigan can pass right to work, we can do anything. And matter of fact, I was at an event a couple weekends ago where Missouri was the Missouri representatives were saying we want our 10th moment. So pretty powerful stuff. So there is some good stuff that's happening here amongst all the bad stuff from my perspective, and I just want to temper the Medicaid discussion a little bit in that context. But also Common Core. We're going to have a lot of discussions around Common Core standards coming up here in the fall. There's going to be a push to get this implemented before the next fiscal year starts, because right now the state of Michigan, in our last budget, put a hold on funding for the Department of Education, Michigan Department of Education, for implementing Common Core standards in the state until there was an affirmative vote by the legislature saying that it was okay to proceed. The legislature has not been involved in the deployment of Common Core at all to date. There was a decision made back in 2010, I believe, was the date to actually go off and implement this, which I should say was sight unseen. They didn't have all the standards. They didn't have any studies. They didn't have anything backing up that this was something better to go off and do. They just had a bunch of people nodding their heads saying, yeah, let's go off and do this. And so that's actually been implemented now for the last 3 years in our school system. So it's kind of a tough thing to go off and pull the brakes on right now, frankly. But the more you peek under the hood on Common Core, the more there is to be concerned about. And I've always made the case that first and foremost, my training is an aerospace engineer, and when I start looking at some of these standards, especially in math, there's a standard A106, I believe it is, simple multiplication, or no, it's addition, I think it was, standard, and part of the standard in Common Core was to demonstrate that 4 plus 4 equals 8. Right? Well, the standard just didn't stop at saying demonstrate that 4 plus 4 equals 8. You had to demonstrate that you knew 4 other methods to go off and prove that 4 plus 4 equals 8. So in addition to the what, it was actually making as part of the standard the how, on how you actually calculate. Now, how do you actually get to that answer? So conceivably, you could get a kid that could get 4 out of 5 answers right and still not know what the correct answer is. Now, as an aerospace engineer, if I'm designing an airplane, I think you guys are going to be more concerned that I actually got the right answer than that I knew 4 different ways of getting to the right answer, right? If you guys are flying a plane, you don't want to know about the fact what the process was. You want to know what the answer is. Now, that could be an isolated circumstance, but having said that, there's a lot of other concerns associated with that Common Core as well. Not to mention, we don't have any governance authority over that whatsoever. This is a private consortium that actually owns the Common Core standards. It's not the federal government that controls it, although they're building policy based on the Common Core that they'll enforce in carrot and stick mode in regards to federal policy. But there's also concerns around international standards and international benchmarking. Maybe that's not a big deal for math and language arts, but when you start looking at social studies, I think there's some serious concerns there. Should we go with the Russian standard on, or the Chinese standard on what a good government is? Or should we go with the United States standard on what a good system of governance is? So there's some concerns on that. What's going to happen in the legislature going forward is there's going to be a lot of discussion on it, but there's discussions around some compromises, around getting rid of some of the more onerous aspects of the Common Core standards, focusing on just the standards and not getting into the assessment, or not adopting the assessment tools that they're doing around with it. Frankly, most of the objectionable material associated with Common Core reflects the fact that Common Core is not simply a standard, it's a system of education. And it's the content, it's the curriculum, it's the materials that are associated with it that's where we get into the most trouble. I mean, just today, the materials, or some of the textbooks that have been developed in accordance with Common Core, explicitly state that the Second Amendment says that we have the right to bear arms if you're in a state militia. Right? That's not the way I read it. And so these are the things we're concerned about. Most of these things are the folks that are providing the books. That's where the concerns come from. But it's something that we should be watchful of. And from my perspective, everything that's going on from Common Core, there's a lot of marketing from folks that, frankly, are usually on our side in a lot of different issues. But they're saying we need to do Common Core because it means that we're going to have higher standards for education. How many have ever heard that? Well, you know what? I've asked for it. Give me proof that these are higher standards and not just different standards. All right? Please do that. I'm assuming that scientific method is still applicable in the science standards in Common Core. Let's go off and do a controlled study where you have some kids that are taught in accordance with Common Core methodologies versus folks that have been taught in traditional methodology, and compare the results. And if you can sit there and demonstrate that we're getting better results out of the folks that are getting Common Core, now you got a case to make saying it's a higher standard. But right now, all I'm seeing is corporate marketing, because in addition to those standards, you're selling textbooks, you're selling media, you're selling assessments. It's a for somebody that's big on free market, I'm seeing that this is manipulation of the free market to tell us via the government that we got to go off and buy stuff that's not going to be good for our kids. So I'm a little upset. So that's Common Core. The other thing, last thing here, is road funding. And then we'll open up for questions if anybody has any. For road funding, how many people have heard that we need to raise taxes in order to get for our roads, pay for our roads? How many people think that we need to improve our roads? Okay, so I believe we need to improve our roads, and I'll buy into the figure that says we need $1.2 to $1.4 billion in incremental revenue to go off and put towards our roads to fix them. But before we go into a discussion of taxes and fees, I want to make sure everybody understands, first and foremost, do you know how much money we brought in last year in general fund revenue that was higher than our revenue for the previous year? We brought in an additional now it's a total of $1.7 billion in an incremental general fund revenue in FY14 than we had for the FY14 budget than we had in the FY13 budget. Yeah, we're being told we need to raise taxes to pay for now $1.4 billion in road improvements, right? My question is, what are we spending that $1.7 billion on?
It's invested in Wall Street.
Yeah, I don't know. No, actually, it's if you go through the budget, and I sit on appropriations, so I'm one of those guys that's not afraid to look at spreadsheets. So I've been drilling in on this and finding out where's the money going. And I'm here to tell you, folks, there's other options besides taxes and fees to get to our $1.4 billion. So what I did back in January, February, and I think this is the reason why we don't have a 1% sales tax increase right now, is because I went off and did a 4-year plan that said, I outlined that there's basically 4 different ways of funding our roads. One is appropriations, first one is taxes and fees. Don't want to go there. We got PhDs in Lansing that are dedicated to finding ways of developing new taxes. And they can go off and develop their white papers. I don't want to talk to them about when it comes to legislation right now. The second approach is appropriations policy. So we already said we got $1.7 billion in incremental revenue. Well, if roads are our number one priority, then maybe we should put most of that money towards the roads. In fairness, what we did last year is we put for the FY14 budget, we put in $350 million towards the roads. Only 115 of it was hard allocation towards the roads. The other 350 was dependent upon us raising taxes in certain areas to offset that load. So it was kind of a conditional allocation, if you will. But it's nowhere near the $1.4 billion that we're looking for. So that's appropriation policy. We can go off and make sure that we're appropriating towards our quote-unquote highest priority. Another area, the third area, is expense reduction. Right? How many people have heard that our trucks are too heavy and they're tearing up the roads, right? So that actually gets to the point where we have to upgrade the roads at a faster pace than we normally would if they were loaded in a responsible manner in accordance with the spec to which they were designed. Well, we don't have that. Matter of fact, our service life on a lot of these roads are not approaching 20 years specs that most of our roads have. And so if you can find ways of reducing our overall expenses from what we estimate is about a $4.5 billion operations and maintenance costs every single year to maintain our current infrastructure, well, if you can find ways of going off and decreasing that maintenance interval, you can lower that cost from $4.5 billion to $4 billion, maybe $3.5 billion, then you don't have to raise as much taxes. So expense reduction is a major area that we can go off and approach. The third area is that the last area, is incremental revenue opportunities. How many of you guys have heard of the National Council of State Legislators? All right, NCSL. It's one of these national groups that goes off and compares what they're doing across all the different states to find out, hey, where are all these good ideas and approaching common problems that all the states have? Well, they identified 4 different incremental revenue opportunities to help pay for roads. One was advertising, one was concessions, one was naming rights, and the other was shared resources. So if you look at advertising, we've got all these opportunities for, and I'm not saying that we're going to implement all this stuff here. I'm just saying that these are things we need to start discussing, especially if we're going to compare that with, or trading that off with raising taxes. Let's start discussing maybe the fact that maybe we could advertise on our roads and bridges and provide incremental revenue there for anywhere from $250 to $1,500 a month is what you can generate for a billboard on the side of the road right now. We've got 10,711 bridges here in the state of Michigan. We've already got signs up on most of these bridges anyway telling you that this is the exit. Maybe we should actually go off and look at the possibility of providing some incremental ad revenue associated with it. Somebody gets value, we don't have to raise taxes or raise registration fees to pay for it. It's another way of approaching it. Another thing, you guys realize how much it costs for a bale of hay? Have you guys ever seen that? For $12 for one of those little squared off rectangular bales of hay. You know what that is? That's just simply grass cut up, rolled up, and bundled, and then fed back to our livestock. for you can generate about $3,000 a year per acre from that grass. Well, what if we opened up our medians so that grass that we're mowing anyway started going to the point where, so these are just examples of something that may seem a little bit off the wall and this stuff, but there's things we can start talking about before we start talking about taxes. And so there's a few other things, naming rights, all that kind of stuff that's out there. Shared resources means that you've got utility right-of-ways for electrical conduit, communications conduit, that kind of stuff, where you can actually charge fees for that. And when we have a community space, well, that's something that's convenient for distribution of power lines, that kind of stuff, and you can charge fees for that. So when you add all that up, you can get to the point within 4 years where you can actually, in some cases, depending on the scenario, within as little as 2 years, you can actually, instead of saying we need to increase taxes, we can actually start cutting registration fees, which are some of the highest cost registration fees in the nation right now. How many people have neighbors with Ohio plates parked in their driveway right now? Wouldn't it be nice to get some of those guys with some pure Michigan labels on the back so they can advertise our state instead of Ohio? So there's some opportunities, frankly, that we need to have that discussion on, and I want to throw that out to you so that we should not just simply focus on the revenue side of the equation, whatever the solution is. We keep doing that too often. We need to start asking what happens on the expense side of the ledger. Where are we spending the money we currently have, and start focusing on that. I'm happy to say I passed some transparency legislation last year that will help us do just that. For the first time, we're going to actually have the price of each of our services broken out by department with breakouts as to how much the contract costs are, how much are we paying for wages, how much for facility rentals, across the board on it. So we're going to be able to do side-by-side comparisons of all the departments, and we're going to actually be able to roll them up into a single portfolio. And our citizens, we're going to have 10 million accountants now looking at Michigan's books instead of just the state budget office. And that's what I'm getting excited about. So if you want to find a way to pay for more funding for schools or for roads or whatever else, well, now we're going to open up the books and put it up in an Excel spreadsheet, and you can start looking through it and find out which ones you want to get rid of. All right? So anyway, I'm going to open it up for questions there, but that's just some of the things you're going to start seeing here coming up in the fall legislatively.
Well, I guess one of the questions on the other is I don't know you. I've heard your name. I'm from Farmington Hills, so that's probably why I don't know you. But tell me, what is your background before you became a state senator?
I was trained at University of Michigan as an aerospace engineer, so I got my bachelor's and master's degree there. Went on to Boeing, worked on space station, worked for Department of Defense, engineering mindset, yeah. So I like looking at spreadsheets, so you're not going to intimidate me with a spreadsheet. And we got a lot of friends up there, frankly, that are getting a pretty wide set of backgrounds now, in the Senate in particular. That's good that way. And I've done management consulting for the last 11 years or so, which actually is pretty much what we do here. I never own the money or the final decision as a management consultant. Pretty much the same thing here. You just got to influence people to get behind a vision that you go off and define and get everybody ramped up. So it's actually been working out pretty good in that regard. It's just politics is always there in any organization.
I was going to say, my comment, I'm a teacher.
Yeah.
Okay. I taught in Livonia my first year of teaching, which isn't
Where?
that far from here.
Yeah, well, no, actually I grew up, that's where I went to school.
Oh, did you?
Yeah,
I
whereabouts?
taught at Cooper School at Middleville and Ann Arbor Trail.
No, I went to
That's
Hoover.
a long time ago. And then, anyway, but then I ended up teaching in Detroit. I'll tell you the story after you.
Okay.
Now, but what I was going to say is, from my observation, I'm not an attorney.
Yep.
Again, here's the question.
From my
I'll repeat it.
observation,
Yeah, sorry.
it seems to me that after Justice Roberts did what he did, and that was disappointing to me, I watched that. It was one vote that there isn't much that we can do anymore with Obamacare.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Do I need? All right. There doesn't seem to be anything that can be done with Obamacare because, and he's our man. I mean, or he was our man.
Yeah.
You know, for Republicans. And you'd think he would stick with the Republicans, and he didn't. And so I just don't see how there's anything that we can do after he went and did that.
Yeah, I was kind of in that mode too for a while, where I was going, well, what the heck can we do? And until I actually was watching Huckabee one evening, and Huckabee had 3 physicians on talking about alternatives to Obamacare, really, or alternative healthcare system. Because, in fairness, Democrats have had us over. Have had us on the point that we haven't offered a cogent alternative to Obamacare, right? We've been in just say no mode, which, frankly, it's a good, valid position from my perspective. But if you can find a position that says, no, we got better ideas, we got a better alternative, well, we found that alternative. And when I called up these physicians in these different areas, and I said, well, how are you getting around the Affordable Care Act to offer these services? That's when I found out about Section 10,104. And it was actually put in by a Democratic-leaning direct primary care service provider out in California. It was lobbied for, as far as I've been able to trace it, to a company called Q Alliance in California. And so it was a little carve-out. And I don't know if you guys know this, but 401k started as this little carve-out, and now they developed into a life of their own. Same thing happened here. And what happens is, in the model that I've developed at least, well, we can fight back. And this is a case where you got to look beyond the letter of the law right now, and I don't comply with the letter of the law, everything, but you need to think strategically. And what I've outlined in this Patient-Centered Care Act is, first of all, we want to get rid of the federal exchange. We don't want these navigators going around recruiting Obama voters. That's all they're going to be doing on this right now. So we want to come up with a free market alternative. There's already exchanges in operation today. I don't know if you guys have heard of eHealthInsurance.com. And there's many others that are out there. BlueCrossBlueShield.com is an exchange because it offers multiple insurance options that are out there. This is not something new in Obamacare. In private world, we've been doing this already, just like we've got Travelocity.com, Orbitz.com, all that good stuff. The key is we're not getting any competition under the current model, right? All we've got is Travelocity.com. We don't have the Orbitz and Expedia and Delta and all those other guys. So what I tried to do is set it up so that we level the playing field, let these private insurance exchanges get access to the same information that the federal government's going to have, not the patient information like BMI and your cholesterol level and all that kind of stuff. No, you don't need any of that stuff here. But the idea that we could level the playing field and just have allow government assistance eligibility to be determined by our private entities. So what that does is kind of chops off at the knees the need for any federal exchange. I mean, when I called up for the exchanges to get quotes on the different healthcare options that were out there, I got a response within 30 minutes. I had 10 phone calls in my. Guess what? When you call up the hotline for the federal government, you are not going to get 10 phone calls back in 30 minutes. So people are not going to want to go to that. So we can wither that off at the vine. The other thing that I did is that we do not have a robust direct primary care model in the state of Michigan because my wife's a physician. I've worked in consultant in the healthcare industry. I've worked as a consultant for a hospital-based system, for a major insurance provider, for pharmaceuticals. I've seen the direction things have been headed in the last decade, and I'm a little concerned. And I noted that all these doctors in particular are looking for shelter, and they're looking for shelter from all these regulations in hospital-based systems. So we've got to go off and encourage them that it's safe out in the waters of free market again. And by that, we need to prime the pump on a direct primary care market. And the way I proposed doing that was to convert the 1.8 million Medicaid-eligible participants in the Medicaid program into a healthcare model that featured direct primary care, high-deductible health plans, and HSAs. You get them out of the managed care program that we have right now, and which is really just ration care. It's just rationed by a private entity instead of by the government, but it's still ration care, and opens the door to actually better quality care, because what's the gold standard of good health care? It's preventative care. It's fixing things before they happen. That means you have unlimited access to a physician. That's what direct primary care will provide you with. So there's a way of fighting back on it where now all of a sudden, I don't need 157 new organizations going off and managing the care of each individual. I don't need to go to a Mother May I get a procedure anymore when I'm a patient that's in need of medical attention on it. I can go to my doctor. And so,
Can you take questions?
yeah. I'm just finishing up. Yeah.
No, I wasn't questioning for my answer. Number 2 on your question.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I'm just trying to finish up there. It's a long answer. I'm sorry. It's a complicated subject. I'm trying to summarize 2,700 pages of regulation in what we got, half an hour. So it opens the door to going off and you take out the government insurance oversight on it, and you just focus once again on that doctor-patient relationship. My solution's been described as 2 parts Marcus Welby, 1 part Steve Jobs on Forbes.com by Dave Chase. So that's a way to kind of fight back on Obamacare from my perspective. So, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, Senator, on the road subject, I don't know if you've taken this into consideration as far as the constructions of the roads. Some roads fall apart again right after the contractors are taking from that item.
Yeah.
I think it might be the type of material that's being used. They might be using pre-used crushed. They take crushed concrete from other existing roads and crush it up and mix it in with the batch of cement. And the cement is not sturdy enough to hold the weight of the vehicles. But still on the road, and the traffic tears the traffic will tear the roads apart again. You can make that into part of the contract of any construction person's bidding on a job. They have to take care of those roads for so many years after it's been laid.
Yeah, actually, a design-build maintenance contract. I mean, it's been proposed as one of the approaches to this. Frankly, substandard construction standards has been something that's been addressed. I've heard a lot of rumors from people that are in the know. They all want to come to me and talk to me about the fact that they have evidence that people have been doing substandard, construction. The fact is, most of these specs are actually spec'd out by the MDOT. They're going off and saying what the substrate's going to be, what the aggregate's supposed to be. They actually go off and specifically, the specifications are battened down pretty tight. They tell you what thickness you need for, so they've already designed the road, essentially. So I've heard one of the key issues is that they're not inspecting the road in accordance with those standards. And that's what I kind of want to zero in on right now. So I'm not a civil engineer. I'm an aerospace engineer, but I do know my way around a spec. So the next few months, I'm going to be going off and diving into some of those specs. And as a matter of fact, I just put out an email at the MDOT to provide me with some pretty technical questions along the lines of what you're asking.
Okay, let's see if we get a couple more questions in here. Do you have one back there, sir, that you wanted to ask?
No, I'm just.
Okay, you're all set. Okay.
I have a question.
Okay. So here comes a question from Eric Bond.
Oh, yeah. Senator, thanks for coming. I'm Eric Bond from Ferndale.
Yep.
You were kind enough to contact me when there was some discussion about the bill you were introducing as a possible alternative to HB 4714. Now in the aftermath, seeing that the bill passed, I'm curious. The news and some people in party leadership are telling us that it was Tea Party opposition to the bill. In my experience, I worked with groups that were independent groups, Republican groups, Tea Party groups, rank-and-file Americans off the street who opposed this Medicaid expansion. Can you tell me, are you worried that there's going to be some repercussions potentially having Governor Snyder as the Republican nominee for people like you, Republicans down the ticket, where conservative voters will have felt betrayed and may not be as motivated to go out and go past the governor to support conservatives like you?
You must have been listening to my speeches inside our caucus as we were debating this subject, because that's exactly the point I was making. And they're trying. Here's a tactic that people like to do, and I've noticed it happens quite a bit in politics. Since I'm a newly elected official, I guess this might be one of those things that I might have been a little surprised at, but when people disagree with you and they got another agenda, they deliberately try to marginalize you. And that's why they sit there and say this is only a Tea Party issue. As somebody who came up through the Tea Party, that's how I started. And whenever there's a contentious issue that I'm on the opposite side of leadership on, I will be immediately cast as the Tea Party candidate, and my views are not valid because all I am doing is representing this marginal group called the Tea Party. The fact of the matter is, especially when it comes to health care, that 11 out of 14 congressional district Republican committees voted in opposition to Medicaid expansion. They passed resolutions saying we don't want anything to do with it, and they're trying to marginalize that and say it was just a Tea Party. I'm sitting here telling you guys, I'm out in Wayne County. People have been in Wayne County politics for 50 years, well before there was Tea Party, that were passionate as heck about the fact that we should not be implementing Obamacare, i.e. passing Medicaid expansion. So I get very, very, very frustrated when I hear people try to marginalize this and say it was just a Tea Party. It's just fitting into the rhetoric, and I don't know if you've seen what Senator Gretchen Whitmer says online. Everything she's trying to do is kind of cast the Republican Party as extremists, just listening to Tea Party. Well, I'm sick and tired of that, and when it comes down to it, me as somebody who came from the Tea Party, we need to make sure everybody understands what a Tea Party Republican is, or a Tea Party Independent is, or a Tea Party Democrat, believe it or not. There's a few of those out there. They're just simply what we used to call being an American. They believe in limited government, they believe in the Constitution, and people, whenever they try these games on it, they're deliberately trying to marginalize it. Well, I don't know if you guys remember what Gandhi once said. First thing that they try to do is ignore you. Second thing that they do is ridicule you. Third thing that they do is attack you. And then the fourth thing is you win. So the good news is, and that's why I want to emphasize when it comes to Medicaid expansion, is that 18 stood solid in opposition to Medicaid expansion. We are building momentum towards getting back to respecting our base, which is not the 8 that voted for it, it's the 18 that voted against it in my Senate caucus. And that's where the base is, and that's where the promise is. And I just want to highlight to you, the road to where we are in healthcare, we started by saying no to a state-based health exchange. So, it was passed out of the Senate, but it was blocked out in the House. It was Senate Bill 693 a couple of years ago. Medicaid, and then we went to state partnership exchange. We had 3 votes on that, and just so you guys know, we have 3 exchanges on the healthcare that we can go off and pick. State-based exchange, state partnership exchange, federal exchange. They're all bad. They're all bad. But the state partnership exchange would essentially make Michigan the complaint desk for Obamacare. That's not a good thing. So we voted no on that 3 times. We voted no on Medicaid expansion in the budget for the FY14 budget. So in a way, we're 5-1 on health care. So I don't want to get too disparaged on this, but most of the folks get it. But your point is extremely well taken. I think there's going to be a lot of discussion on that up on the island this weekend. We're going to have the Mackinac GOP conference, and it's going to be some very interesting discussions. And people that think that this is just a marginal fringe activity are going to be sorely surprised, because it is not marginal in this opposition to Obamacare. It's not marginal in opposition to just increasing taxes and forgetting the fact that we got more than enough money for roads. It's not marginal in any of these positions. These are core Republican values, and it's about time we respected them.
And Senator Fred's going to ask the last question of the session.
Okay, pretty simple question. What's your position on the Second Amendment?
I'm solidly behind the Second Amendment, and I believe that it's that the key operative phrase in the Second Amendment is "shall not be infringed." And I was just startled. I was talking about the Common Core instructional materials today, saying that they're rephrasing the Second Amendment to say that it just means that state militia can bear arms. And there's a conscious effort on the part of people to redefine what the original intent was in our document. For Michigan, I don't know if you've read Michigan's Constitution, but it's very, very clear. I mean, we have the right to bear arms in self-defense. I mean, it's not even close to you can't sit there and say that it's militia. But I took an oath to support the Constitution, and I did not take an oath to support an abridged Constitution or a modified Constitution. I took an oath to support the Constitution.
Well, thank you very much, Senator. How about a round of applause for Senator Colbeck? You're welcome, sir.